Hi! Am I nuts? Am I talking about potentially demonetizable content? Maybe. But I thought I would share a short little video on how I used to hitchhike. So I've always thought that this was a talking point of interest, something interesting about me, a story time maybe. But I always thought I could save it for a podcast, and girl, what podcast? So today I want to talk about hitchhiking. So hitchhiking in America has declined a lot. Although hitchhiking is still popular and normalized in other countries around the world, hitchhiking in America, not so much. Especially now with rideshare companies like Lyft and Uber. I can see the need, the necessity, the interest, or even the understanding about hitchhiking being non-existent. I bet my youngest brother would think that hitchhiking is something that happened in the 70s, whereas I used to do it and I had seen my mom pick up hitchhikers before, which is why I had picked up hitchhikers when I started to drive as well. So my style of hitchhiking isn't really the thumbs out, so I am using it, but any hitchhiking purists, that's not necessarily the case. However, I did get into strangers' cars in order to get a place I could not get because I was probably walking. So other than my mom picking up people in the car when I was younger if they were driving by, that was kind of unconscious to me. But the very first time I got in a stranger's car, I was in middle school, maybe high school. We had a half day at school and my high school boyfriend had invited me over his house, so I took the bus to his house. We had a half day because it had been snowing, and by the time his mom came home from work, he had asked me to leave, and it was basically a blizzard outside. Because of that, no one could pick me up, so I walked home. Normally, walking to his house was about a cool hour, but I was young, it kind of took an hour to walk everywhere, so it wasn't that big of a deal. However, in high school, I used to wear Vans and a skirt, or Vans and maybe some jeans that I had scribbled all over. And I don't know why, but from age 11 to 19, I did not wear a proper jacket, so I was probably wearing 3 hoodies. But, I don't know, desperate for male attention, I, didn't even think it was an offense worth breaking up with him about. I just said, oh shucks, that sucks for me, and started walking home. Because it was a full-on blizzard, I was able to kind of just walk in the street, also I had no choice. So, about a quarter of the way home, a beat-up little Camry pulled up behind me, and it was a woman, and she said, "What are you doing out here?" I said, "Walking home from my boyfriend's house." Judge me. And she said, "Get in my car, where do you live?" And without weighing any consequence, I just immediately got in. I was more worried that I was going to get her floor mats wet from being covered in snow than any potential risk. Although I don't think she was, scouting the streets for girls walking in the blizzard, she did see that a young girl, underdressed, was walking in the snow because a man made her do it. And she took me home. I wasn't worried about her giving her my address or anything. Honestly, I was in distress, and I remembered her my entire life. Because of that, the next year, 2 years after that happened, when I got my driver's license, I picked up everybody. If any old kid was walking on the side of the road like I was, I picked them up. One time I drove an entire basketball team downtown so they could play basketball. For context, I was driving a minivan, but I drove past them and I said, "Hey, where are you guys going? That seems far. Get in. No, get in. Get in." And I drove that whole basketball team to the basketball court. I didn't care. I picked up kids all the time. But, they were local kids. It wasn't until a couple years later that I no longer had a car and I was walking home with this big bag of cat food. So I could take a bus one way, but the bus only came every hour, and if you literally just missed it, you knew you were waiting an hour. So I, just missed the bus, and I started to walk up this big hill, and there was no sidewalk for like a cool 2-mile stretch. There was sidewalk leading up to it, stopped, sidewalk afterwards. I said I have no choice, and I had walked it previously, before with no problem. So I'm walking home with this big bag of cat food, and I had to keep taking breaks, switching my arms, and this car pulls over and he says, "Get in. Where are you going? Get in." And I'm like, "Oh, just up the hill." And I really just was desperate to put this cat food down. I can't remember if it was hot or cold outside, but I can feel the weight of just when you've been carrying something for so long that your arms are just numb. So I said, fuck it, and I got in this guy's car. Inside of the car, I noticed that there's this entire breathalyzer system. Maybe it's a shared car in his household, or usually the cars are equipped with this breathalyzer situation if you've had too many DUIs. So this guy had this whole breathalyzer system in his car. So I immediately got a little worried, because to me this seems like something I should be at least conscious of. Is he a good driver? Is he under the influence? Has he been, in car accidents before? At the same time though, I thought maybe this is his like new lease on life, and he's picking up people, he's trying to be a lot nicer, make a new life for himself. I didn't really think too much more of it, because I thought, thank God I'm not carrying this cat food up this hill anymore. And it was nice. I did have him drop me off at the top of the hill though, and not exactly at my house, but almost as a courtesy to him. Like, I really didn't want to take up any of his time anymore. Finally, my biggest, other than like kids all going to like one area, or like punks at the punk show, we're all going to the after party, get in my car, I don't know you, but it should be fine, we're all together, we're drinking Boone's Farm, it's totally cool, here's a couple bucks for gas money. Other than that very normal natural exchange that happened all the time, that could have been potential for reckless driving or being kidnapped or whatever, all of that was really natural to me and not something I ever worried about. Sometimes just like getting home was my highest priority and not like my safety. My biggest hitchhiking road trip was actually all the way to Chicago. I've talked about this before on the channel, but I'll talk about it all over again now. And that is the time I hitched with 2 goat farmers on the way to Chicago. So I was planning to see Joanna Newsom for the very first time perform, and it was the first time she had performed in like 5 or 6 years. I don't know, something dramatic enough to make me go, I need this. So I got tickets to see Joanna, but she was playing at a music festival. So the tickets were really crazy. I didn't have any interest in seeing any of the other bands or even being at a music festival. The very first thing I did to make sure I couldn't talk myself out of it was buy the tickets. I bought one day just for Joanna, and that was it. It wasn't until like the night before that I asked one of my Tumblr friends if I could crash on their couch, but I knew I had to get the tickets. About 3 weeks later, I got fired from my job, and I was living paycheck to paycheck, so I had no money. Well, I had 2 options. I could spend my money and have no money when I got back from Joanna Newsom, or I could not go to Joanna Newsom and consider the tickets a loss. That was the most responsible thing to do, so I just, moped in my room for like 2 days until my roommate knocked on the door, and she saw that a couple on Craigslist were looking for someone to accompany them on their long trip. It might not sound like hitchhiking, but it is a couple on Craigslist looking for a third person to join them on their car ride. So, hitchhiking. She said, please reply to them like, this is your big chance. A flight to Chicago at the time, or even now, can be like between $100 and $200. And the couple was asking $40 for the ride there. My ride home on Greyhound was around $100. So in that, I saved some money, you know, enough money to live on by riding with the goat farmers. I had to take a train up to Lancaster, which is about an hour from here, to meet them. And then when I got to the train station in Lancaster, that's when we introduced ourselves. I didn't have a smartphone at the time, so there wasn't any cheeky like take a picture of them and send it to my roommate or police officer. It was just like, okay, here I am. No, I don't really have a suitcase or anything, like this is it. If there was some sort of anticipation for us to all take turns driving, that never happened. Although I had my driver's license, they never asked me, which is fine. But I think it was really good company. They asked me a ton of stories and we all got to talk. And you know, if you've ever been in a relationship for a while or been with your roommate for a while, sometimes it's nice to just tell your stories to new ears. You know what I mean? Like, even there's some stories I love to tell that I'm sure my friends have heard 1,000 times. So I think having, you know, me in the back so they could talk about goat farming and things like that to a new person was pretty fun. I was basically convinced at the end of the ride to try goat milk. I didn't. I was vegan then, but you know, I see their perspective. I'm convinced. They dropped me off at the Greyhound station because I had never been to Chicago, so I didn't know any points of contact, so I just said that because it sounded safe. And that's where they dropped me off. We stopped at a rest stop, I got a bagel. It was actually really pleasant. I'm sure that the risk was really high, and I asked myself honestly if I would ever do it again, and my honest self says no. Which is a little disheartening because for $40 I traveled, you know, across the country and got to meet some really sweet, cool people. They were going to a wedding and they were like, do you want to come? I don't know if I was invited to the wedding, but like to vibe. And they were staying for, I think, the whole weekend because they did offer to drive me home, but I could only stay for one day because I just had to go home. I had like no money. And you know, didn't know where I was staying until like literally the night before. Shout out to Tony, you really put me up last second. I gave you my Netflix account for life. But those were all the times, significant times, that I hitchhiked and it was positive. I can't say for certain that I should encourage you guys to hitchhike. I honestly believe it is a lost idea. I think that people probably won't do it anymore, especially with Lyft and Uber. I think the convenience and the price is just too easy. I think when we were kids, it was easy to hitchhike because we didn't want to bother our parents and we just wanted to get home. But you know, I've seen a lot of kids now who have their parents like Lyft hooked up. I think the kid only has to be like 16 to get in the Lyft, so I've heard of that. But hitchhiking was definitely cool when it was cool. I want to know, do you have any hitchhiking stories? I did this just like almost naive, or just like, was it the thrill of it all? I don't know. But I'll always remember those goat farmers. Anyway, I love you guys. Make sure you subscribe if it's your first time here. I really appreciate it. And give this video a thumbs up. Any other stories I have that I've been saving for the podcast that I don't have yet, leave your requests down below. Love you, bye.